So most of my petticoats live up here in the closet, and these are really easy to take down and get petticoats in and out of. But I have some petticoats hiding in this bin right here, and I just pulled out a petticoat that I have no recollection of making. Like, it looks like I did a pretty good job, but I have no idea what project I made that for and what period that is supposed to be for. But I'm just like in awe of myself for completely forgetting something that I probably spent 10 hours constructing. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. I am currently struggling with my tape dispenser. How is it linked together? I don't understand. Here we go. What a great start to a video. And my week is starting off with sending out some Patreon rewards, and I'm doing 1830 seam sketches for January. And I think I will have a video that shows the entire process of drawing these sketches if you're interested. At least that's my plan. And I have lots of plans for today, just in general. I'm drafting an 18th century sack back gown, which I am terrified of because I totally don't understand how those dresses work. So wish me luck on that one. And I'm hoping to finalize an 1840s dress pattern and maybe get started on that and a matching bonnet. That would be good. So I don't know how much filming I'm going to be doing this week, but hopefully I'll be doing enough to get an interesting video out of it. This is my favorite of the sketches. I really don't want to give it away, but I probably should. So I am, but I don't really want to. Now I just need to double check all of the addresses, and then I can put these out front, and hopefully they will get sent off today. So it is now much later in the day. It is about 3 o'clock, and I've been listening to a really interesting podcast about escaping a cult. That's fun. While I've been working on this dress. So you can kind of see me here. I'm doing a sponsored video about constructing this, but I'm doing the draping off camera because it's really tedious. This is going to be an 18th century sack back dress, which means that it has this type of draped back, and I've done a draped back like this before as a train edition, so it wasn't actually patterned into the dress, but for these gowns they were. So there's this train, but it is also tacked to the lining, so it forms to the body slightly. And then the same piece is pleated at the sides to form the skirt, and it's split away from the bodice here, so I can pleat it down, get the necessary volume. And it's just something that I really struggled to visualize, and that's why I put off making one of these for so long. And I thought about just buying a pattern, because I know American Duchess has put out a pattern, or doing an exact recreation or replica of one of Nora Waugh's patterns, or Janet Arnold's. I actually have Janet Arnold's over here. This dress has been a big inspiration for me when it comes to the patterning process. So this has been really handy, just seeing the dart placement, the overall shapes of the pieces, also being able to see how wide the pieces are and get an idea of the amount of volume that would be historically accurate. Also, I've noticed that a lot of these patterns have a pleat down the front, so I've incorporated that to my dress as well, and that's just been really nice. But I have wanted to drape this on my own because I feel like that gives me a better understanding of how the garment is supposed to go together than just printing out some massive sheets of paper and kind of following it to the best of my ability. So I think I'm done, and now I'm at a point where I can transfer this to paper, and wish me the best of luck. I'm gonna need a lot of paper for it, but I have already drafted and draped the lining, which is what I did earlier today. So underneath all of this, I have a lining pattern that I know fits me. So that's kind of serving as the base for all of this, and that's what the back gets tacked onto and all of that. So really hope this works out. I just don't have enough of mock-up material to make a mock-up for this, because it requires like 8 yards of fabric or something ridiculous. And yeah, wish me luck. So I wasn't sure what to work on this morning. I'm not in a super chatty mood, so I don't think I'm going to finish my mock-up vlog, and instead I've decided to work on the 1840s project. So my table is looking great. I just figured out which color piping I want to use because I bought 3 options, and wouldn't you know, I liked the one option that I had the least amount of. So I ordered 2 yards of purple and 2 yards of blue, and I liked the fabric that I purchased to do a band on the bonnet with. But I just think it brings out the colors the best. So now that I'm looking at this, I'm not sure. Maybe I should use the blue. I'm going to turn it into piping and then see how I feel, but I just went ahead and stay stitched the edges of these so I can clip into those and then kind of iron them on that line of stitching. And then I'm going to make my piping out of yarn, and that will get sewn half an inch away from this edge, and then I can get it all sewn together and it will be delightful. So I made a little test because I was so undecided on the color of piping, and I decided that making it blue makes the most sense, even though I absolutely adore this fuchsia. I just don't think it quite matches the fabric well enough, which is sad, but sometimes sad is the reality. I'm just going to go ahead and pin these on top of the piping, and then that edge will get sewn by hand. So I'm doing these sleeves that have piping inserted in them, and usually when I do piping I fold one edge inward and then I whip stitch it to the piping so you get it right up against the edge. That's what I did with the seams on this bodice. So that allows you to get it really close and get a really smooth curve and have a lot of control over it. But you do have to sew it by hand, which I know isn't ideal, especially for something where you want it to be really structurally sound like sleeves. So what I've done this time around is I've sewn my piping on where I want it positioned on one piece. And now I'm going to take my other piece and lay it on top, and I'm going to pin it from the other side. So basically the side that already has the piping on it is facing up. And I do this because then you can see where you have stitched the piping on, and the piping should be stitched on as close to the edge as you possibly can. So then when you're seaming it to the other piece, you just try and follow that path of stitching, and it should give you a really clean end result. And worst case scenario, you can go back in and you can restitch it to be closer, but I just find that this is a really awesome way of doing it when you're working with finer pipings that you can't necessarily feel that the foot is pressed up against. Because I know there have been many times when I've been working with softer pipings and I've ended up sewing over top of the piping and just had it look really uneven and really bad. So I love this solution for it, and that is what I'm going to continue to do. And don't these ruffles just look adorable in general? I love them. I'm so happy with how this is turning out. So I feel like I probably had about 10 minutes of random footage before you're seeing this clip, but today I'm going to try and film some bits and pieces, and I've got a lot to do today. I've already gone to the bank, gone grocery shopping, and done laundry, and I would like to put away laundry, clean my sewing room, clean my bathroom, do a bunch of dusting, cleaning up downstairs because my brother's coming over. I also have to make a cheesecake. I want to get all the closures put into this bodice and to do a fitting with this bodice and to get the skirt cut out and get the skirt panels seamed together and potentially get the hem marked on the skirt, or at least get the top edge gathered. I'd like to do some hand tacking on my 18th century pink beast over there. I've got a plaid suit that I want to get cut out. I have a plaid suit that I'd like to put together, and I also have a romper that I'd like to finish. And the plaid suit and the romper are both separate videos, so you're not going to see too much of them in this one. But I did want to mention them because they are on my list for today. And I'm also waiting to hear back from someone on Facebook about potentially picking up a dress form that is like 2 hours away from where I live. So I think I'm going to make a list, and then we will just see how many of these things I actually managed to accomplish. Oh, and before I try and accomplish any of those things, I got some patterns in the mail today, so I thought I would open those up with you, and I just spilled hooks all over my counter. One moment. I officially have a list, so that is some amount of progress, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you the patterns that I got. Not sure which ones these are. I went kind of crazy and I ordered a whole bunch of vintage patterns. The first pattern I got is a really cute jumper, and it comes with a blouse underneath it. This blouse has a sort of lower collar, which I really like, and I also thought the dress was really cute. And then I bought this pattern, and I have seen a lot of these. These are very popular and they tend to be very expensive, and they're these two-piece kind of play-suit beach sets from the 1950s. And I really want to buy one of these after watching Mrs. Maisel and seeing all of the really fun clothing that she wore when they were vacationing. Then I also bought this shorts pattern because I love shorts and I want to make more shorts, and it is a McCall's pattern, and I like that this pattern had pockets. Then the last one I purchased is made for a 28-inch waist, and it's a really interesting wrap skirt with this kind of placket detail on the front. And once again, I think this is from the 60s, but it really reminded me of designs you see in the 30s and 40s. So this was pretty pricey, but I thought it was the cutest thing I had ever seen. It is this romper that has this galloped over the shoulder button detail, and I just thought it was adorable. And then this is the last one, and I love this so much. I'm going to use an obnoxious jellyfish print material for this, and I cannot wait. I think it's going to be delightful. So that is my pattern haul. Now I need to get to work because, as I said, I've got a long list for today. So all of the bars are sewn on, and they're not perfectly even because this edge ended up being slightly too long. So the hooks are spaced 1.5 inches apart on this edge, but some of these are like 1.25 inches apart to force it to fit. So I'm going to fix that on the actual pattern, but that's just going to be a defect on mine because it's a little too late to do anything about it. But I'm very nervous to do a fitting. The mock-up fit fine, but the fabric that I'm using for the real garment is a little bit stiffer and a little bit thicker. So we'll see how this goes. Gonna get my corset on and just hope for the best. I just did a fitting and it fits perfectly. I am so happy and so relieved and so excited to get this finished. But now I'm gonna move on to getting that cut out, and that's gonna be part of another video, so I will talk to you once that's over. So we can go ahead and check this off and check this off. I've got the cap in my mouth, which is why I sound like this. Now working on a bonnet to go with the dress I showed you earlier. I've been working on my plaid thing all day, so I've got the skirt completely cut out, the vest is finished aside from buttons and buttonholes, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's going so far. But I'm just taking a little break to work a bit on the bonnet to go with the 1840s project. And I've got a couple of references I like that really show the side profile of the bonnet because I think that's probably what is most important. The front profile is kind of intuitive to draft or to shape because you want your face to be visible, but it's really that side profile that makes it iconic to a certain period. So I've got a few examples, and I just started out with a 12-inch by, I guess, 20-inch strip, and then I lifted that up to my head and I positioned it the way it would be, and I realized that it is way too long. It extends way past my face. So I'm going to cut about 2 inches off and then fit it again, and then I can start shaping the sides of it. So it's probably still a little bit too long or too deep. It still extends past my face. I'm going to start doing a bit of shaping, and I'm just going to draw a curve on the bottom edge here and see how that frames my face. I get so many questions about how I draft hats and bonnets and things, and I don't have a specific method. I just start out with some very simple shapes, and then I continue to trim and mark them and hold them up to my head until they start to form the shape that I want for that specific project. I like the shape of this curve, but I just did another fitting and it is too long at the sides. And that wasn't particularly obvious when I started because I was focusing more on this length. So I'm going to trim about 1 inch off and then reinforce that curve. So now it looks like this. So you can kind of start to see the shape come together. Not super clearly, but you can get an idea of it. So now I'm going to shape the sides so I have that upward tilt, and that's also going to start spreading the bonnet outward at the front so it takes on more of that historical shape. So this is what it currently looks like. I like the shape it's taking on, but I do think it is actually now a little bit too short. So it falls kind of just above or level with my jawline where it should sit slightly below it. So I'm going to create a slit down here, and I'm going to add 1 inch of extra paper, and then I'm going to do some more fittings with it. So I just created the back portion that shapes the bonnet, which is just a circle, and I started with a 4.5 inch circle, but it was too small and it was causing it to sit very strangely on my head. So I redid it with a 5.5 inch circle, I want to say, and I like how that looks a lot better. However, it forces it to sit farther back on my head, and I found that these were kind of splaying away from my face in a way I didn't like, so I made a pretty substantial addition to the front of it, which I just think makes it look a lot nicer. So this is pretty much done, to be honest. I'm probably just going to transfer this to a new sheet of paper, and then get that cut out for my interfacing and do another fitting to make sure that I like how it looks. Then I can start sewing wire into it and get it covered, and hopefully before the night is over, I will have something resembling a bonnet. So now this is what I'm working with, and as you can probably tell, it's really starting to come together. So I cut it out of the interfacing and I like the shape, so I moved forward with adding the wire, and I zigzag wire around the entire outer edge. Then I also did a couple bands of wire. This one was a little bit short, which is annoying, but I think it'll still work. Then for the back portion, I also stitched wire all the way around it. And it was quite funny when I was doing this, my sewing machine was in buttonhole mode and I hadn't realized. So I thought my sewing machine had just become stuck in backstitch reverse mode and I was gonna have to do it all backwards, but I didn't have to. And now, usually I would cover these layers separately. This time around, I'm actually going to sew them together first, and we'll see how that goes. So this is what the bonnet looks like now, and I probably put about an hour of work into it, if not longer. So you saw me sew on all the wire, or I showed it after that step, and then I realized I should really line it before sewing it together. So I just whip stitched this bright purple dupioni to the interior, and then I sewed the back circle on. But it was at a really off angle. So instead of being like a proper poke bonnet where it had the straight top and the straight back, the back sloped out pretty dramatically. So I actually made a huge slit in the interfacing, and I just kind of scooted them together until the shape was better. So now there's this little bump on the inside. There was a little dent on the outside. So I just padded that indentation with some quilt batting, and then I covered it with the taffeta. My plan is that this part is going to be covered with plain taffeta like it is now. This part is going to be covered with a ruched band of taffeta, so it's going to imitate the ruched detailing on the front of the bodice. So I've cut out a 6 inch wide strip. I'm going to gather 1/2 inch away from the edge, 1.5 inches away from that edge, 1.25 inches away from that edge, and then where these two meet, I'm going to cover it with some flowers and a band of blue dupioni. So that's my plan. This has taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but it is coming along now and I'm finally happy with the shape. I'm glad that I didn't have to start over because that would have taken even longer. So I finished my bonnet and this is by far my favorite bonnet I've ever made. I did all the gathering last night and then this morning I bound the front edge and hand sewed it down while watching Drag Race. Then I sewed together a tube of material to create the band around it and made some bows. It also has a tie that can go underneath the chin or just be tied at the back. Since that's not super flattering. Made a little ruffle for the back of it, and then I just added some paper flowers that I had in my millinery supply drawer. So this is my favorite bonnet I've ever made, and I actually got the dress finished as well, and I got that photograph this morning. So I have a couple little fixes to make to the dress. I also have to redraw out the pattern before sending it off, but it is finished and I'm so glad. Now that the project associated with this pile of fabric is done, I would like to try and get rid of the pile of fabric and get these pieces folded and put away where they belong. So I am first going to cut some of the scraps down so I can make little swatch cards for Patreon as well as for my own filing because in my portfolio I like to have swatches of fabric alongside finished photos. Though I haven't updated my portfolio in over a year, so that's like an in theory thing that I like to do. So I'm going to take some swatches, get them stapled onto these, get them labeled, and then I will figure out another task to do tonight. Hello everyone, so it is the start of a new month, and I am starting this month off by going to FedEx and to an estate sale. It's currently 8:40 in the morning, and I have something to send off to McCall's, which is back there. So we're heading to FedEx, and then there's a well, not really local, an estate sale like 40 minutes away from where we live that looks like it has some vintage clothing and some figurine-ish stuff and potentially some sewing supplies. So we're going to check that out as well. So I just got back from the estate sale and I am so glad we went. When we got there were probably 20 people waiting outside before it opened. And I just thought it was going to be such a disaster and so busy and so a waste of time, but it ended up being fantastic. There wasn't vintage clothing, which was kind of disappointing, but there was so much sewing supplies. So I ended up getting a whole bunch of embroidery thread, a whole bunch of lace, some scissors, and some pattern weights. So I think I'm going to end up doing a haul video, but I'm just going to organize this stuff on my own time. So basically all day I've been organizing lace just because I wanted to get this done with. It's been in progress for 3 weeks now, I want to say, and I just want everything sorted. So all of it is on bolts now, and these are just canvas boards that I've been buying in bulk from Blick, and they're very sturdy. They feel like super thick cardboard, and then one side is covered in white canvas paper. So they work really well for bolting lace, and as I said, they fit really nicely in photo boxes. So I have 4 photo boxes in blue that match my sewing room, but the rest of the ones I have are in this color, which doesn't really match my sewing room. So I went to Michael's and I picked up 4 in this print, which is perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. And they also sell frames. So I purchased a frame as well because I want to add to my little art wall behind me. Specifically, I want to add this print, which I showed in a previous video. I think it was my Lancaster, Pennsylvania haul. And it is a comical piece based on the size of women's sleeves in the 1890s. So it's probably a larger frame than I really needed, but they are 50% off, so that is going to be hung up there. And to mat that and make it look pretty, I also bought a sheet of scrapbooking paper, and then I bought some really pretty flowers as well. So I think I'm going to stick these up back there and try and make a really pretty looking little wall. And then I noticed as I was checking out that they had ribbon on sale. So it was buy 1 spool, get 2 spools for free. I decided to buy just a whole bunch of the 1.5 inch variants. And then lastly, this was something I really did not need, but it's very cute. I saw this adorable little sheep for Easter. It's made out of a really soft fuzzy fabric and it just has the cutest little face and it has little blushing cheeks, and I just fell in love with it. And then I was looking at the Easter section and I found its mother. So I love both of these very much and I could not leave without them. And now I have to find a place for them, but they're going to be very welcome here. So I think I'm going to film a little segment for this vlog of me doing some reorganizing because I have to make room for this ribbon, and I also have to shift around my shelves and find a way to make those photo boxes fit. And I have to put all my lace in those photo boxes, and then we will see what it looks like. And now I need to get out the extra shelf for this. I need to put it down here, and I need to relocate a couple bolts so it will fit because I need about this much space in order for the photo boxes to fit. Also, this is my ribbon bin, so I'm going to have to go through this. I might end up getting rid of some, and I'm also just going to reorganize it, so hopefully everything will fit a bit better. Apparently when cleaning up yesterday, I'm finally getting rid of the hardware for that little shelving unit and the wall mounting stuff for those units, which I've had for like 4 years. I also threw out the pegs I need to go in here. So we just searched in the basement, found some nails, and I cut about an inch off the ends, and hopefully these will work. That totally worked, but unfortunately based off of the placement, that means that this shelf is taller than I wanted it to be, but the one underneath it is too small. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to have to figure something out. Also, I went ahead and reorganized the ribbon. I could have gotten it all to fit in here, but it would have been a tight fit. So I decided to add my rickrack in here and have this be ribbon at the front and soudage cord. This is thread binding and some larger spools of ribbon. Then all the smaller spools I've moved into here. So it's really nice and easy to see them. This is a spare bin that I had and it matches this room really nicely. Now I have all of this to sort out. That's not intimidating at all. Okay, it is mildly. I'm going to set you up somewhere, wherever I have the spare surface, and then we can do this together. So I think I have everything organized, and I ended up having room for a couple colorful laces. Then I also bolted some more colorful ones, and I might just slip these in on the side so I remember that I have them. It also frees up a bit of space in the original colorful lace bin. So I've organized this into larger pieces of lace that won't fit on both. And here I have ruffled lace trims, and I also have some colorful ones. And then this is just random, so things I can't really categorize. These are all trims that I've purchased, so they're not organized by type so much as these are ones that I know are in my collection and are newer and I will gravitate towards if I need something specific. These are bolts and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them yet. These were just so pretty that I didn't want to take them off the bolts, or I didn't think they would fit well on my smaller bolt. And then in here I have some handmade lace and also some machine made bobbin lace, and some of this is very old. Like some of it was praised by its previous owner and is from like the middle of the 19th century. So some of it's old, some of it's new stuff that I purchased that imitates the older stuff, but it's all in there. These are all eyelet lace trims, and then I've got some of the eyelet lace tapes that you sandwich between fabric for lace inset work. This is primarily crocheted lace, but it's kind of a mixture of things, and then I have some bulkier lace trims at the back. And then this is again a mixture of things. Like this one I'm well and truly going to call random. They fit perfectly. So I realized that for this one, as long as I don't have any of the larger spools that stick up, they will fit. So I've got ones that I'm probably going to reach for less and also happen to fit in that space down there. Then I've got some that I'm going to reach for more frequently up here. So I'm going to go ahead and label all of these, and I think I'll have a little bit of room left at the side where I can tuck those larger bolts, or at least that's my hope. So this room is still quite messy, and I've ended up with piles on top of there and piles on top of there, which is a temporary storage unit already. And I'm not thrilled about that. I'd hoped they'd all fit on the bookcase, but I'm really pleased with how the bookcase looks. I think it's super cute. Just ignore the book that I don't have a home for and the giant bag of trash. Doesn't it look adorable? I'm going to do a full sewing room tour at some point, so I won't go too in depth, but I think it looks really, really cute. Up here, I got my print hung. They're all kind of staggered because I didn't want to get a level to line things up properly. So I went for the intentionally misaligned look. And then I added little paper flowers around them, but I don't. So annoyingly, this camera wasn't plugged in properly, which means my backup battery didn't charge and the battery I was using ran out of charge. So it's kind of become problematic to film what I was supposed to film today. I wanted to film a Sewing Through the Decades video, but to do those effectively, I really need to have 2 cameras set up at once. So since one is dead, I can't really do that. So I got all the darts marked and pinned and sewn, and I did the first batch of sewing just in general, but I really need that other camera before I can move forward. So I think I'm going to wait half an hour while it charges, and I'm going to get this cut out. I haven't made a mock-up, so this could be a big fail. We'll just have to wait and see. And then I can resume progress on the 1960s Sewing Through Decades project. Also, I am just absolutely gleeful over how cute this shelving unit turned out. It's made me smile all morning, and now I should really go back to real work. So I'm going to work on the list of plans that I think I mentioned in another video, or I mentioned earlier in this video, which involves an 1830s riding costume. It also involves an 1830s or 1820s blouse. I got the skirt for that project cut out. And there were a couple other things in there that I can't even remember. So I'm going to get out that pile, and I think I'm going to have an evening of drafting and just turn on some music and get these dress forms filled up with some new ideas. I've also prepared all of my references for draping, so I'm ready to go ahead and drape between like 2 and 6 garments tonight, depending on how it goes. But I just measured the dress that I'm making a replica of, and it's actually that dress. So if you follow my blog or my Instagram, you'll have seen it before. It is my beautiful sunflower gown that I made in 2 days, and I'm recreating it out of this cotton. And then I have this netting that I'm going to use for the sleeves. I've got the same lace I used on the original dress, and then I've got this fabric, which is just gorgeous, that I picked up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I'm going to remake it out of that, and I've just measured it and figured out what the skirt panels need to measure. So I think I'm going to get those cut out and seam together tonight as well, and then I will start draping. So I've made 3 mock-ups, and there's one more that I want to get done, but I've run out of dress forms. So I'm going to transfer all of these to paper and hopefully get a start on some mock-ups tonight. Otherwise, I'm going to continue working on that, which I got cut out yesterday and seamed together. And I also marked the placement for the lace on it, so I could start sewing that. But I'm going to try and get these onto paper first. And I have about an hour until I need to feed this one. So we'll see how much I can accomplish before then. So I haven't filmed very much tonight because I've been knee-deep in learning new techniques. So this is an 1830s riding jacket that I want to make, and I think I filmed the draping process. I draped 3 things the other day, and I know I filmed the process of one of them, but I can't remember which one it was. However, this is the one that I've decided to dive into first. So I made a mock-up this morning, made necessary alterations, and now I've gotten it cut out from my final fabric, which is a beautiful wool that I purchased from Fabric Mart. It's probably a little bit too heavy and nubby for a riding costume, but I picked it because I knew I wanted to do tailoring techniques on this, and this is a pretty forgiving fabric because it doesn't have a very small weave or sheen, which means I can use pad stitching techniques and the stitches won't be as visible from the front side. If you're unfamiliar with pad stitching, I've done a really crap job of this. I really couldn't get the hang of how the stitches were supposed to be placed, so I think I'm gonna have to do some more practicing, but for first attempt I think I was gonna say it's decent. It's really not, but it is what it is. I'm trying, and that's something. Basically, pad stitching is a stitch that is used to adhere an interfacing or a base to another material. It can be used to add volume or a support structure to various points in tailoring, but is most frequently used in lapels and collars. And the fabric I'm using for this is a hair canvas, and unlike horsehair, this actually does have horsehair in it. So it is a kind of medium to heavy weight canvas that is used to add structure and rigidity to the fronts of suits and to make it look just a lot sharper. I don't know if you can really tell how smooth the front of this looks, but I'm really pleased with it, and that has a lot to do with the fact that this is carried through for most of these front panels. And then I just hand stitched the dart, and then I cross-stitched the dart of the hair canvas to the seam allowance of the dart on the outer fabric. And I've been playing with some new ironing tools, so not only have I been using my gravity feed iron, which is really cool. It's got water supply over there, which goes through that little filter hanging and then through these tubes, and that causes it to have a very powerful, very hot steam. That steam is really setting the fabric and helping it take shape. So it's really fantastic for a malleable fabric like wool, and I've really enjoyed it for all of my projects, but for this one especially. I've also been using my tailoring ham to get those darts nice and smooth and more in line with the shape of my actual bust, and I might end up adding some padding in the bust region too, not to make myself look bustier, but just to smooth everything out over the corset. I've also been using this tailor's board. Actually, I don't know if it's called a tailor's board. It might be called a chest board, and it's also a sleeve board. So the top of this functions as basically a smooth edge that you can drape things over and fit your garment to and then iron across. So for example, the edge when I wanted to iron the edges of the collar open. So it works really well for stuff like that, and then you can flip it over and you can actually put a sleeve on this and iron it really thoroughly without worrying about creasing the underside because it just slips on top. And a tailor's board is actually like a wooden block that doesn't have any covering or pattern on it at all. And I've actually ordered one of those as well. And I'm really excited for that to come in because even just working on the collar, I realized how much it would help having one to get the points nice and sharp. But that's okay. For a first attempt, I'm pleased with this so far, and I'm going to move on to the next step, which is drafting the facing for the lapels and then getting that cut out and attached. And I was originally using this book to give me a good idea of the various steps, but I found it kind of hard to follow. It's still a good book. There's a lot of good information in there, but it just wasn't enough for me. So I've been using this book instead, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. I purchased this as a present for myself over Christmas, and I was initially kind of disappointed because I thought it would focus on a variety of different tailoring techniques, but it actually just focuses on all the techniques used to make this garment. However, that takes you through pretty much everything you need to know, and tailoring methods, unlike piecing and silhouettes, is something that hasn't really changed over the past few hundred years. So I think this is really great whether you want to make modern garments or mid-century garments or proper historic garments. And I was originally, as I said, kind of disappointed because I didn't feel like it covered enough information, but it actually takes you through all the supplies you need to tailor things effectively, all the different materials, so the various canvases and hair facings and various inner linings, the differences between hard tailoring and soft tailoring, all the stitches you need to know, how to cut things out, where to use the various different materials, and it's just so rich in terms of information. It's also incredibly thorough in terms of the photos. So it goes really, really in depth, and it's kind of intimidating in a way, but I feel like one of the hardest things about learning something new is that you just don't know what you don't know. And if someone hasn't put all of that information in one place, you can be doing things for a really long time because it just hasn't occurred to you that there might be a different way to do them, or you haven't been able to come across the information that goes through it. I know that was one of my big issues, and it's still one of my big issues with historical costuming, is that you kind of assume things are done a certain way until you see it proven otherwise. And there isn't like an all-knowing Bible of costume design and historical sewing that takes you through all of those differences between modern techniques. So yeah, this book has been a godsend, and it's been especially helpful having it alongside me as I'm making this, so I can reference it through each step, even if I'm not following every single step perfectly. So the bad news is I accidentally rammed my toenail underneath my sewing room table, which just so happens to be the perfect height for your toes to go underneath it and for your nails to catch. So now that's bleeding quite a lot, but I've got band-aids on it, so it's probably fine. And the good news is that this is really coming along. So I got the facing cut out and then sewn in, and then I stitched all the way around it. I'm not super happy with how pointy my points ended up being, but it actually matches the slightly rounded nature of the points on the collar, so I think it may end up being a happy accident. Basically, the facing just covers the lining on the inside, so when the collar, or lapel, sorry, folds out, you see the right fabric, a fashion fabric. So it only extends to about here, and it should honestly usually just extend to about here, but I wanted to incorporate it into the points because I thought it would help me get them a little bit sharper. In hindsight, I don't think that was the case, but it's a little too late to go back now since I had to trim some of the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. Thomas says I need to stay the neckline with bias tape before I set the collar, so I've done that because what Thomas says to do, I do. And now I just have to follow all of these instructions, and they actually have photos regarding the part that I tend to have a lot of problems with, which I guess is called joining the collar. So I'm really excited about that. Gonna read through all of this and then attempt it myself. I just spent a little while tidying and everything looks much better. Still very cluttered in here because I have so many things in progress, but I'm pleased. I was just about to put this away, but I wanted to show it to you first. So this is the sleeve pattern for the riding jacket. So it is a 2-piece sleeve pattern and has a very large amount of volume at the top, which is ruched down to fit the shoulder. And then it puffs out quite dramatically, and then it is relatively fitted through to the cuff, or from the elbow to the cuff. So this took a lot of trial and error. The pattern started out probably half this size, and then just kept growing until I was happy with it. I've actually got one sleeve at least halfway done. I have to gather it down a little bit tighter because it's too big, but both sleeves have the pieces cut out and sewn together. So this is what it looks like after that process is complete. And now I'm actually going to trace the gathering line on it. So this line here indicates where the gathering begins, and then I just keep gathering it back and forth until it is all gathered down and looks relatively smooth, like this one does. But as you might be able to tell, it's actually quite poofy here. That's because I had to ease it pretty dramatically to get it to fit the jacket. And right now it's just pinned in. So I'm actually going to unpin this and then gather this a little bit more so it fits without all of that bulging. But basically I have to repeat this process on the other sleeve, and then I also have to sew in the cuff facing. So I'm going to take some progress photos of that and begin on that process, and then I'm going to drape something new. So I had a lot of things on my list for this week, and this was not one of them, but I just randomly came across this fabric in my stash, and I became really excited about the idea of making a relatively simple medieval project, maybe with a little bit of beading around the cuffs and neckline. So this is the fabric that I want to use. I actually purchased this at the same time as the silk that I used for my McCall's Renaissance project, so that's how long it's been around for. And then I'm going to recut this out. So this was supposed to be the project for 1960 sewing through the decades, but I'm really unhappy with how it's going. This fabric frays a lot more than I thought it would. It's really not very flattering on me. The fabric is so thick that I can't get the cuffs to look good, and I can't get the corners of the collar to look good. The armholes are fraying out of control. Everything has to be bound with lace, which kind of shrinks up the edges a little bit and makes it pucker on the sides no matter how much I steam it. And I would rather spend 5 hours making a new version of this out of fabrics I like more than spend another 30 minutes getting this finished, because I just know I'm not going to wear it. So I think I'm going to make a different variation of the same pattern. So instead of being a dress, it's going to be a blouse and a jumper. And I'm going to use this fabric for the blouse and this fabric for the jumper. So that is my current plan, and I will update you when I have some progress to share. I have to refill this for the first time. Do you think I should stand on the chair that spins or the padded stool? Success! I think tonight I'm going to try and get the bodice for the dress that will go underneath my riding habit done, and I should probably drape it first, but I'm actually going to go through my random metal buttons, which are in this container, and pull out some that I can use for the dress, because you're not going to see it, so I just need ones that are roughly the same size. So I finished draping it. I draped it almost in a Regency style, so it has, I think it's called a star-shaped back actually, but it's basically where the back is almost like a diamond shape, and this is the strap. It extends all the way from the, oh gosh, I'm like forgetting all of my words tonight. I'm so tired. But the end of the shoulder all the way to the inner back or center back. And then the front is relatively low cut because you don't want it to show out the top edge of the jacket. You also don't want it to hang below the jacket. So I've gone for a relatively high, kind of just above the natural waistline, though I might lower it a little bit in the back. So I'm going to transfer this to paper and make a mock-up and then move forward. This is that laid flat, and this I had to draft a dart into to fit it over the bust of my dress form, but my bust is a lot less pronounced than that dress form just in general, especially when I'm wearing 1830s foundation. So I'm actually going to slash this and then sew the fabric, or draft the pattern so it's like that instead, and then I don't have to sew the dart, and then I can cut the side panel as one if I want to, though I don't think I'm going to because I actually want to have it button closed on the side, but that is an option when I do it this way, which is nice. I discovered a new nail polish site that stocks a whole bunch of different indie brands, and I currently have over 30 in my cart, which is a very bad thing for my bank account, but I'm not going to buy all of them. I'm probably only going to buy half of them. I haven't bought new nail polish in a really long time, so I'm kind of using that to justify buying a large quantity today, but I think 30 is a bit overkill. Anyway, today I have been working on the remake of the sunflower dress. So I got the skirt cut out and the trim sewn on several days ago, and then today I actually also cut out the remake of the 1960s project, but I realized I don't have a long enough zipper to construct it, and Joann's doesn't have good sales until 4 days from now, so I can get the blouse finished without that zipper, but I'm not as chipper to work on it because I know I'm not going to be able to get it finished before the end of the month. So I've decided to put some time into this project, and I turned my yard of this black netting that I had in my stash before I purchased more into these 4.5 inch wide circles. And I cut out, I don't know how many of these, but over 100, and they are going to be folded into quarters, so they look like this, and they're going to be ironed like that, so the curved edges all match up. Then they get gathered down by machine and sewn together to form something that will look like petals once they are wrapped around a base. Since these are black, they don't look quite as petally-ish as the yellow ones did, but hopefully you get the idea. I also went ahead and measured all of the flowers on the sunflower dress and created a pattern for them. So I think I was just doing it by eye and like tracing around circular objects in my sewing room the first time around, but I figured out the diameter of all of the circles and then got patterns made for those and got the 9 ones that I need cut out. So I can begin assembling those once I finish all of the petals, and as you can see I have quite a few more left to do, so that's going to be my next task. I've been the absolute worst at filming this week. In fact, I've just been the absolute worst this week. I have barely gotten anything done. It's been so frustrated because the week before I felt so enthusiastic about everything I was working on, and then this week I just absolutely crashed. But last night I just didn't have the enthusiasm for anything historical. I didn't have the mental energy. So I actually got the Jellyfish dress mostly sewn together. So the facing is sewn, the sleeves are on, the cuffs are gathered. I just have to finish this properly because right now it's just tucked inward. I have to hem it, do buttonholes, and add buttons. I think I'm going to do a poll over on Instagram to see what color button I should use. And yeah, I'm sorry I didn't document this, but it was just a fast little fun project that made me feel a lot better since it meant I was moving forward at least a little bit. And now I just wanted to go ahead and figure out what buttons I'm going to use for this. This is going to be made over on Patreon and a Patreon exclusive vlog. Let my $10 and up patrons vote, and they voted for this design and this fabric, and I just want to go through my button binders and pick out what buttons to use. I think this would look really cool with gold buttons or brown buttons or green buttons. So I've actually got gold and brown buttons in this one. And then these are my colorful buttons. And I posted about this on Instagram as well as over on Patreon, but I had so many buttons, and I'd actually been given a lot of buttons from my great aunt. So I had lots of little buttons I had organized into bags, and I couldn't figure out how to store them in a way where I could see them all. And then I randomly thought of binders, and it just worked out fantastically well. So I'm just going to go through these and pick out some buttons, and then I will get back to work on something. So I got another thing crossed off my list. Actually, I haven't crossed it off yet, but I will. So I ended up cutting out all of these petals to create flowers. So here I have some that I had left over, and I decided that I want to send out little flowers to my top tier patrons. So that meant that I had to cut out 100 of these and iron them one by one, which is a pretty tedious process. So we are now at 11:15 and I'm going to go ahead and gather down the top edge of the skirt and then I'm probably going to shower and go to sleep. So it is technically March 1st today, and by that I mean it is most definitely March 1st today, but since February was such a short month and since I didn't film anything for the first half of it, I think I'm going to extend this video for another 2 days, just because I feel like I'm 2 days away from finishing a half dozen things. I'm not even exaggerating. I think that jacket, the riding coat, is only going to take 2 more days, since the sleeves and the jacket are kind of independently finished. They just need to be stitched together and lined. I also have the bodice for the underdress pretty much done, so I just have to draft the skirt, get the skirt cut out, get the skirt hemmed. That part might not be done the next 2 days, but I can at least have it looking like an actual jacket before the end of this video if I extend the end of this video by another 2 days. I'm also really close to finishing this dress out in front, the Jellyfish dress, which I haven't done a great job of documenting, but last night I got all of the buttonholes sewn. I also finished sewing the cuffs today, so these were sewn with the right sides facing each other, and then the cuff was turned inward, and then turned inward by a 1/2 inch and whip stitched to the lining so it looks nice and pretty. And I have the buttonholes up here as well on the little tabs, and I think it looks quite nice. So I just finished leveling the hem because it hung a little bit longer in the front than the back, and now I'm going to hem this with some hem tape. Never mind, I didn't have enough of the hem tape, so I'm just using some 1 inch wide bias binding. I'm going to sew this on really close to the edge of the hem and then turn it inward by, I don't know, 1.5 inches maybe, and then the top edge will just be whip stitched down by hand. I actually got this bias binding from an estate sale I went to this morning. I ended up leaving with a sewing basket full of bias binding. It's all modern stuff, but it was really cheap, so it was worth getting, and I can add that to my little stash of it. By a little stash of it, I mean all of this and all of this that no longer fits in this bin. And I also got a sewing machine, so maybe I will show you that later since I need to get it cleaned up, and I'm really excited to start working with it. It is a Singer for the 1960s. So it is a Zigzag 466, and I think it's from 1968, but there's not a whole lot of information about it online. So that was my fun little purchase of the day. So there it is, finished in all of its glory, and I will add some photos of it finished as well. I'm going to take this brooch off before I ship it out, but I thought it was a really nice little addition. Then the sunflowers for this were all made out of velvet and the netting that I used for the sleeves. And I improved the construction of this a lot. The first one was an absolute mess since I made it so quickly. So yeah, and I think I replicated the placement of the flowers really, really nicely. So now this is going to get boxed up and sent off. I think it looks cute. So I'm officially back from all of my errands. I actually was pretty efficient with them considering how far away everything is from where I live. So this is going to be the final clip for this video, and I just want to give you a little peek around my sewing room and show you some of the things I accomplished. It is the 1960s Sewing Through the Decades project. A lot of people thought I abandoned this series, but I just put it on hold for January, and unfortunately I didn't pick it back up until the end of February. But I made this twice, so I made a pink version first, and then I trashed that at the beginning of the month, and I remade it, and by beginning of the month I mean beginning of March, even though this is February's vlog. And then I remade it out of a cherry printed cotton as well as this Platitudes flannel fabric from Joann's. So those pieces are all done except for the hem, and I've actually trimmed the hem. I might get another once over, but I trimmed it roughly so it's all level, so now I just have to sew binding onto that and then fold it inward and whip stitch it down by hand. I also have this in progress, and I am overjoyed with how this looks so far. This is my first real attempt at tailoring where I'm doing pad stitching and I'm doing the outlining of the lapels and I'm doing handworked buttonholes and I'm doing properly sewn buttons, and it's been a lot, but it's really exciting to learn new techniques and feel like I'm successfully learning new techniques and seeing my skill level improve. And I did a fitting with this last night and it fits amazingly. Unfortunately, the bodice I made to go underneath it, which will support the skirt, does not fit very well at all. So I think I need to spend a solid day working on that and getting the skirt cut out to really move forward. But what was really holding me up on this project were the buttonholes, and I haven't really talked about this, but I am dreadful at buttonholes. I think at one point I knew how to do them properly, but I do not find the buttonhole stitch intuitive at all. My thread always ended up getting tangled and I would just give up. And these still don't look pretty. Like, I do not want to get super close to these. I wish I had practiced more on a garment like a corset first and done my eyelets this way for a little while before putting them on the front of a project I've invested a ton of time into. But I look back at all the things I did poorly when I was first starting out and trying techniques for the first few times, and I don't think about how crappy they look. I think about how grateful I am that I pushed myself to learn them. So that's how I'm trying to feel on this too, even though they're kind of dreadful. Actually, I don't think these two look too bad. They just look nothing alike. And I think what really caused me a struggle with learning how to do this is that all of these tutorials are written by people who are clearly very familiar with the skill set, and the diagrams of it are from an angle that you don't actually hold the needle and thread when you're doing it, or they're slowed down to a degree where it's almost more confusing because it isn't how you would naturally stitch it when doing a buttonhole. And part of doing the buttonholes is keeping the tension really, really perfect all the way along so it doesn't roll inward. So I think I finally figured it out. Mine don't look great, but I know they're gonna continue to look better moving forward, which is a nice feeling. And the buttons I'm using for this were from my great aunt, and they're completely metal molded silver buttons, which I think are awesome. So there are 2 of those on the sleeves as well, and all the buttonholes for the sleeves are sewn. So now I can get those sewn on and then get this lined, and it'll be one step closer to being finished. So as for what is coming up, tonight, specifically, I'm cleaning my sewing room, and then I'm going to work on the mock-up for the 70s project, and probably also the jacket and the hem for the 60s project. I also have an Eton jacket, an 1890s project that I'm really excited about. I have an 1860s women's war uniform that's been in progress for ages, and I'd really love to get the jacket for that drafted and finished up. It'll also give me a chance to practice more of those tailoring techniques, which I think is really good for me. And I'd really like to make a medieval project. I've got this really, really pretty brocade-like fabric that I want to use as a base for it, and then I purchased a whole bunch of beads for it. So I think I'm gonna kind of have a day of just fittings and mock-ups and try and work out everything I want to work on throughout the rest of March. And I'm probably going to have commitments for McCall's in March too. I might end up doing a St. Patrick's Day dress, which will be long gone by the time this goes up. But yeah, those are my plans. As always, I would love to hear what you got up to in February or March or April or whenever this ends up going up, and I will see you guys next month.